am from to support collaborative research between undergraduates and faculty that results in digital projects. In our remarks, you're going to hear both similarities and differences in how we use the term digital liberal arts, how we focus on faculty and students, how much, in different ways and in different roles. Also how we structure the curricula of our classes and programs. We're all going to talk about what we do, what we've learned, and we hope that you'll have plenty of questions, suggestions, or remarks for the time. We've carved out quite a bit for discussion. We're going to be starting with Jacob Heil, who's a Mellon Digital Scholar for the 5 colleges of Ohio. And he works with faculty to develop digital projects and pedagogy from a consortial perspective. I really value Jacob's perspective on creating a culture of digital project building across such a wide constituency. And then we're going to hear from Andrea Wren and Janet Simmons, who both run centers and have stories to tell about building actual physical spaces at their institutions, Whittier and Hamilton. And then Bill and I, who work at Hope College, Bill started the Mellon Scholars Program, which you might think of as sort of a 3-year honors DH program for undergraduates. And I've been working there for the past year, teaching the Centerpiece year-long sophomore seminar. So the conversation should be interesting for really anyone that's involved in supporting undergraduate digital research, how to build infrastructure for this kind of work within institutions, and how to foster just a general culture of digital research and pedagogy. So please jot down anything that interests you for our conversation later, because we have plenty of time for it. We're all going to now talk for 5 minutes each. We'll get engaged in each other a little bit in what we overlap, what we have differences in, what we learn from each other, and then we'll open it up for discussion after that. So we can start with Jacob.
Great, thanks. Sorry, as I get settled. And I wrote a script for myself because if I don't, I will talk for well over the 5-minute allotment. As you can tell by this preface. All right. So in my role as the Mellon Digital Scholar for the Ohio 5, I have kind of a bifurcated sets of responsibilities. On the one hand, I guide projects from the idea phase through planning with a team and a formal proposal, and then into development. By design, I do none of this alone. I assemble teams that usually end up making the projects go. So I become a project manager at the topmost level, a project facilitator or organizer with more or less responsibility depending on any number of variables. This is kind of like the process of what I do. That's the thumbnail sketch. And I'll be happy to talk more about like how we set up that process in the Q&A or afterwards or anything like that. But on the other hand, I see myself as the hub of consortial conversation about digital scholarship. And you'll see, this is kind of stepping out of this for a moment, we hope that you'll see kind of a progression from where we are in the 5 colleges, kind of constructing this impulse for digital scholarship all the way through the development of the center model, kind of beginning from the inchoate stages to the formality. So the hub of a consortial conversation about digital scholarship. This is a much more nebulous enterprise for a variety of reasons. But it's also the part of my work that is the most important in fortifying a digital culture that can undergird digital projects and pedagogies well into the consortium's future. Because this is more nebulous and a bit more speculative, I want to spend my remaining few minutes unpacking this a little. Our 5 colleges, Oberlin, Worcester, Kenyon, Ohio Wesleyan, and Denison from north to south, are separated by about 100 miles at the tips. Intra-consortial face-to-face meetings are difficult at best. We bring people together when we can, but consortial communication is most often virtual. However, the initial planning meeting for any project idea that comes through our pipeline is an in-person meeting because I believe that proximity lends itself to a team mentality. I don't have data to back this up, but I imagine that data probably exists, so tweet that at me or something. Do my research for me. This is a place where an aspect of my project management philosophy has informed this philosophy of culture building. Human connections are important parts of infrastructure as well. That's why this is the nebulous part of my work. It's based on a sense of connectedness, a kind of affective digital scholarship. And while liberal arts colleges aren't immune to disciplinary and departmental silos, far from it, I do see these kinds of professional human connections already. Perhaps it's because the campuses are small, the populations are low, and the entirety of the institution shares that prime directive for pedagogical excellence. So from a consortial perspective, while I've been tapping into existing structures like the Center for Innovative Pedagogy at Kenyon, or the Oberlin Center for Technology Enhanced Teaching, OCTET, it's the world without acronyms. While I've been tapping into these structures, I've also been tapping into the sense of a shared student-centered mission. Bringing folks together at the local level is an easy sell, at least conceptually. But in scaling to the consortial level, these connections are often primarily conceptual. My work puts me in a position to draw the through lines between projects. What's more, I talk a lot. But I talk a lot about the ways in which these interdisciplinary and, when we can get them, intra-consortial collaborations are models for the way in which digital liberal arts gets done. The students are the center, but the paths that faculty, librarians, educational technologists, the paths that these folks take to get there are all different and differently necessary components of digital pedagogical projects. By making these connections and amplifying these conversations, I hope that I'm fostering the sense that projects are plugging into a larger system, that they don't end once the project is deployed, but they help to color our portrait of Ohio 5 digital scholarship, kind of all capitals there. I've talked in the past about a center which is not one, about a digital scholarship for which the partnership and not the project is the basic measure. And I think that this must be what I mean. The consortium is itself an abstraction, but if we can knit that notion together with a set of deliberate and reflective digital agendas, then we might begin to see ourselves as nodes in a consortial community, a digital culture. This isn't just about being part of something bigger than yourself, which is problematic in any number of ways, but it's about rethinking our approach to projects. Rather than setting out on the hunt to find the tech and the technicians who can bring capital T, capital V, the vision of the project to life, we imagine instead surrounding ourselves with the people who can help us think through the project, through. We trust that the tech will follow. When it's the teaching that's the end game, it's easier to make project development more about collaborative process than the product. It's the thing that we talk about a lot here. Those are my remarks. Thanks. Is it Andrea?
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Wren, and I'm here from Whittier College. You know, I noticed that you have a timer going. Could you? I want to make sure not to overcome my time. Can I look at it? Thank you so much. All right, because I do think that what we really want to do is save a lot of time for sort of discussion and question and answer. I know many of you are in the process or are doing this kind of stuff already. So, and Jacob was just talking about the process, not the end product, and I think that's absolutely imperative, really, to make this group an interesting panel. So let me tell you a little bit about Whittier College. We are in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area. We're actually in the city of Whittier. We are a small liberal arts college and a Hispanic serving college. Our student body is very diverse and also somewhat, maybe we have a large difference in levels of preparation. We have many students who are sort of tested into incoherence, I think would be one way to describe California educational practices. And now I'm feeling really guilty because I have a lot of good friends in California education. But the problem of sort of over-testing is something that we really struggle against. As Whittier, our center is in the library. We are a collaboration between librarians, faculty, and students, and we are set up, imagined that way. We started about 4 years ago with a series of campus conversations, with other institutions in an area, and looking at some people right now who have been huge mentors for us. And actually there is in Southern California a wonderful consortial group called the DH SoCal, Digital Humanities of Southern California. And we have learned a lot from them, and we have built connections, and we attend their events and are planning to host some in the future. So we're really lucky for that, that sort of regional focus that we benefit from. So DigLibArts, as we call it, we've recently discovered our students don't like that phrase, so we're thinking about changing it since we're student-centered. They call us the DigiLab, actually, which I kind of love, actually. So the DigiLab, we'll call it. We started off with thinking that what we wanted to do was support faculty to integrate digital pedagogy into their teaching, that would be a way to enable students across the curriculum to experience digital scholarship in a wide variety of courses. Now, one thing that we are definitely focused on, and one of the reasons that we borrowed Bill's term, digital liberal arts, is that we are absolutely not just humanities-based. In fact, we support faculty in chemistry. We have somebody doing something fabulous with something he calls robo-muscles. They're small little mussels that sit in the water and have sensors and collect data, and he analyzes the data with the students. It's really exciting. So we support faculty in the natural sciences, in the social sciences, and in the humanities. So that's very important for us. And we started off by thinking that we were going to support faculty, and through the faculty reach the students. What we discovered was that that's great, but we also need to support the students of the faculty, and that's where the DigiLab comes in, right? So we have this wonderful new sort of growing center in the library. Our head librarian has been very generous in sort of giving us space and letting us play with it and reimagine it and redesign it every few months as we discover what would be better, right? Currently what our plan is to put everything on wheels, and so then every 2 months we can move it all around, because that seems to be what we like to do. So we try to serve the entire campus, but we also want to create opportunities for students to, who choose to focus on digital scholarship to really do some of these more deeply engaged long-term projects. And so we also are working with Whittier's alternate curricular track called the Whittier Scholars Program to enable students to do long-term undergraduate research projects. So as well as working with individual classes across the entire institution, we also are working with this one sort of stepped curricular path. Now, the Whittier Scholars Program has existed for 25 or 30 years, I believe. It has been an undergraduate self-designed interdisciplinary major program for a long time, and it has a sort of a wonderful history. And we aren't trying to transform the Whittier Scholars Program entirely, but it does seem to be the perfect hub for digital scholarship on our campus, because we envision digital scholarship to be above all interdisciplinary, right? Above all, getting out of those departmental silos that I think Jacob mentioned just a moment ago. So for the Whittier Scholars Program, students do not have to do any of the other liberal arts requirements. It's entirely a self-designed major, self-designed curricular program. And they begin generally as freshmen with an introductory course where they start to imagine what it might be like to design their own curriculum and where this might connect to what they want to do in their lives beyond and outside of and around college. So the program is really about engaged scholarship, always has been. And therefore, it's really just the perfect locus for digital scholarship. So in the 101 class, I'm encouraging students to learn sort of network literacies. And we are a small college in an incredibly rich academic region, so connecting to other scholars in our region using Twitter, using all sorts of, creating their own digital profiles and so forth. And then also connecting to scholars beyond our region. I have an ongoing project with a colleague in Egypt and in New York, and so the students are sort of learning about sort of intercultural digital competencies by connecting with students in other countries and other regions of the US. So just to sum up here, we started with a faculty service model, We absolutely still do that, but we are beginning to do more and more sort of curricular building, and that's the direction we're moving in the future. And I have all sorts of more stuff to say, but my time is up, so I will finish now.
So I hope you guys can hear me, and I apologize in advance for squeaking and croaking during this presentation. So I'm Janet Simons. I'm the co-director of the Digital Humanities Initiative at Hamilton College. I see many friends in the audience. Thank you for being here. We started in 2008, 2009, and I just want to acknowledge that this is a co-directorship with Angel David Nieves, who is Associate Professor of Africana Studies at Hamilton. And we also have a team of other folks I'll introduce you to in just a second. When we started in 2009, we were actually building upon a very strong foundation of teaching and research with students in the liberal arts. We had a long-running course support, curricular support initiative that was a collaboration among librarians, educational technologists, and faculty in various academic support centers like the Oral Communication Center, the Writing Center on our campuses. The Hill Group provided support when we started doing digital assignments across the curriculum. So we were very fortunate in having that foundation in place. What it allowed us to do then in 2008, 2009, with the advent of a very enthusiastic dean of faculty, Joe Ergo, who came in and shook up the humanities, what we were able to do was then focus on research, digital humanities research. So our digital liberal arts continues. We have adopted and borrow some of that phrase, but it continues in the form of a very concentrated research effort through DHI. These research efforts have specific hooks back into the curriculum. So for instance, any research project that we accept, one of the criteria for acceptance is the research faculty member has to develop assignments and or design an entire course around the research that we're going to be working with them on. So we, from the very beginning, stipulated, you know, this is what we're all about. This is liberal arts, right? We have to have that happen. The other criterion that we really stick to, we have a bunch we kind of let slide, but the other criterion that we really stick to is that we require that they incorporate an undergraduate student into the research project from the initial consulting phases throughout. That research effort is because our goals include liberal arts perspective, quite clearly. We want faculty-student digital scholarship to be happening. We want that combination. We want the direct connections to the curriculum to develop out of that, both from the faculty member's perspective and from the student engagement with what's happening. And then we also want this to be sustainable. We are not a research institution. We're a small private liberal arts college. If we have any hope of maintaining this type of work, it has to be integrated throughout disciplines, throughout all aspects of what we do. The focus on the digital humanities, though, has allowed us to take advantage of innovation around multimodal technologies and how students might consider not only using multimodal technologies in research approaches, but also in their own digital scholarship. So here's an example of just the collection development team. I want to point out there is a core group of folks that incorporates librarians, technologists, Unix system administrators, library system administrators, metadata specialists. All these people form part of a team with faculty-student project pairs. And we follow a process. I don't expect you to get this. I'm happy to send it to anybody. But the reason I wanted to show you this slide is because it took us forever to figure out how to do this stuff, right? And what I find really validating is other centers, other initiatives that are about the same place as we are doing kind of the same thing. You see these characteristics. You have to do this consulting phase. You have to do a scoping phase. You have to go through the process of designing. Then you kind of go through a prototyping phase. And this is true whether it's archive-based research or an innovative seed exploratory project, which kind of runs the continuum then of what we do. These projects result in not only a faculty member's digital scholarship, but undergraduate student-related scholarship. They tend to own a portion. They find a portion of the project, we negotiate the extent to which it is theirs, ownership is theirs, and then they take it where it needs to go with advising from their faculty researcher and with the assistance of our collection development team. They've done some pretty amazing things. Carrie's project is just one. To support that level of sustained undergraduate research, we had to develop a research program. So we have our class scholars, which is similar to the Whittier scholars and I believe similar to the Hope, that allows us to provide a 15-month period during which students are able to find their steps into these processes. These types of projects require collaboration. So we think about collaboration across the projects themselves and over time with different members of the community and with the public. We also think about collaboration across institutions and the extent to which inter and intra-collaborative activities, the sorts of things that Jacob was referring to, break down silos and then also allow us to extend ourselves to do those more ambitious projects. We don't have necessarily, even with as many resources as we have, we don't have the ability to do some of these larger scale projects without collaborations in both technology and research interests around these activities. And just a final plug about one of these collaborations, Iliad's conference, of which everyone at this table is going to be associated with, is happening in July at Hamilton. Y'all come. Now I'm turning it over to Bill.
Okay, thanks, Janet. So hello, I'm Bill Pannapacker. I wear a number of hats. I'm a professor of English at Hope College. I'm the founding director of the Mellon Scholars Program there. We started that planning around 2008 and launched it in 2010. And I'm the faculty director of the Digital Liberal Arts Initiative for the 13 colleges, the Great Lakes Colleges Association. Pardon me for being a little bit scripted in the remarks that I have, but as my students often say, I can expound to fill the available time, and it seemed like the best thing to do is to keep on to topic. So a couple years ago, I wrote an essay called Stop Calling It Digital Humanities, which I didn't really mean in a general way. But I did mean it in perhaps in the context of the small segment of American higher education of liberal arts colleges, and mine in particular, because digital liberal arts, or DLA, seemed more inclusive and more fully identified with our institutional mission across the disciplines than other terms that are more readily associated with major research universities and individual departments. We were never just about the humanities. From the beginning, we were arts and humanities, we were social sciences, even some students in the sciences. And so it seemed an unfairly exclusive and alienating term to call it digital humanities. So for whatever it's worth for now, the DLA brand, always understood as something provisional, temporary, and even for those reasons semi-ironic, has since been applied at Middlebury, Occidental, Whittier, Grinnell. The Mellon Foundation is using it to some extent, as well as at my home institution, which now has a position for a DLA fellow, Alex Galarza, whom you'll be hearing from in a moment, and is currently seeking a DLA librarian, someone who will serve the whole institution, particularly the students and faculty, as digital approaches become more normalized throughout our curriculum. More broadly, the Digital Liberal Arts project that I've been directing for a couple years now, part of, again, the Great Lakes Colleges Association's Expanding Collaboration Initiative, is the purpose of which has been to cultivate digitally enabled or enhanced cross-institutional collaborations among our 13 member colleges, and also increasingly in the years to come, the 14 international institutions that we call the Global Liberal Arts Alliance. Some projects in this program should ultimately include external partnerships with research universities, in particular MSU and the Matrix Center for Digital Humanities and Social Sciences here. But we're exploring other partnerships with regional consortia and research universities. Over the past couple years, I've participated in what we half-jokingly call the Odyssey of Colleges, which means attending luncheons, driving all over the Midwest and elsewhere, talking about DLA, speaking with interested individuals, and in general, conducting what grant officers call a sounding of interest. We seem to have attracted about 10% of the faculty in the GLCA to participate in this initiative, and I don't know if that's representative, but there's a data point. Among the faculty, the basis for their interest in DLA was varied and usually defined more by discipline than by prior engagement with the digital per se. However, many librarians and instructional technologists and not a few administrators expressed enthusiasm for the initiative as a means of fostering innovation in teaching and building connections between different kinds of college professionals. So first of all, this was never something that was purely about the faculty or faculty and students, but it was, when we talk about DLA, inclusive of the institution as a whole, all the professionals who work within it, and even beyond that, extending out into the community. It is a kind of holistic vision, not just something that is driven by faculty engagement. And among those people, there's a consensus that traditional teaching and research should be expanded to include more collaborative work and public project building, not just in the sciences, but in the non-quantitative fields as well. In the last couple of years, the proposals have grown to more than 25 with collaborators from nearly all of the GLCA colleges and many external partners. For the larger projects, it's generally been a process of conversation, revision, and planning for phased implementation. Start small and then scale up. They tend to develop these projects in unforeseen directions as the proposers, who may not have known a great deal about DH or DLA at the beginning, become more engaged and discover new tools and resources and find new possibilities for collaboration. And I guess my role, the largest part of my role has been to matchmake, to kind of organize speed dating events and get potentially like-minded people around the same table for meals and drinks to see where their projects might intersect. Most commonly, I found that DLA project teams have expressed interest, most obviously in hybrid courses, sometimes disciplinary, sometimes cross-disciplinary, that could be taught across multiple institutions, giving us a deeper bench of expertise and possibilities for collegial partnerships, allowing a consortium of liberal arts colleges and the students who attend them to have some of the benefits of a research university, where there can be significantly more subdisciplinary collegiality and support when it is needed. So in some ways, you could be concerned that these collaborations across liberal arts colleges might lead to the elimination of arguably redundant faculty positions, but at the same time, it creates the opportunity for those of us who are in these institutions to engage more deeply with our subspecialties. So it giveth and it taketh away. There are many projects that could be described as public scholarship, a collaborative online journal of literary translation, a regional environmental dashboard, a site for coordinating digital storytelling projects, a multidisciplinary cultural exploration of India, another one in East Asia, one coming in Mexico. There is a vision for a digital Great Lakes project, part of which has been developed in the first instance by the Mellon Scholars at Hope as something called Digital Holland, Michigan, which Alex will say more about in a moment. So in those ways, we've been finding that DLA, as we've applied it, allows faculty and students to delve more deeply into local cultures while thinking more broadly about the region, distant cities, and global partnerships. And quite often the students reveal to us what we should be doing and supporting it in ways that we could not have anticipated. It's largely, to a surprising extent, student-driven. And as I now understand it, the digital liberal arts is less about the digital per se. Digital humanities opened a lot of doors to possibilities, but it's much bigger than that now. It's about finding new ways to collaborate across disciplines, divisions, and institutions with each other, students, faculty, and staff, and to leverage our resources even more effectively so that we can provide better experiences and outcomes for our students and the communities that we serve. So digital humanities as a charismatic meta-discipline opened the door to all of this back a decade or more ago. But I think if you want to define digital liberal arts, the best strategy is to begin by articulating your mission as a liberal arts institution. And certainly that would apply to any sort of institution, that it's driven by the mission, not by the preoccupations of the discipline as it exists. To narrow this down a bit to the Mellon program at Hope, we began as an honors program in digital humanities. That's how we framed it and got the support of the Mellon Foundation. but as time went on, we thought of it more as a program focusing on high-impact learning practices as they're commonly understood. We based it on the strengths that we had as a liberal arts college, which in particular was faculty-student collaborative research. It's what we were known for, but primarily in the sciences. And what we wanted to do was bring that over to the arts and humanities and fire on all cylinders, as it were. That gave us a great deal of support from administration because it was right in line with who we wanted to be as an institution, but had previously been unsuccessful in nurturing for a significant part of the college. It's based on close relationships between faculty and staff and students. As I mentioned, it's about collaborative research, but also grant writing. We have a grants program for our students, and a lot of presentation. Our students by the time they leave, they are inured to public appearances of all kinds at every level. They've just done it so much. We engage in cross-cohort interdisciplinary project building, like Digital Holland, as you'll see. Engagement with digital technologies has always been strongly encouraged, but it never has been mandated. We provide financial incentives, opportunities for faculty development and travel for those who want to do it, but we wanted to bring faculty members into this program on the basis of collaborative research and then incentivize the digital piece of it. We didn't front load the digital, if that makes sense. What else? We provided funding for summer travel and research fellowships for our students. We have a summer fellowship program that students compete to receive grants for. We have an experiential education program. We've explored service learning. We give some attention to what we call transferable skill building and dialogue with employers through local employers, through our entrepreneurship center at the college, and also through an off-campus program called Digital Liberal Arts at Work in Philadelphia that we've been trying to launch for a couple of years. So we think about this program, not wholly, but at least partly, since our students certainly want this, as closing the gap between the needs of employers and the students that we are producing, which is something that certainly liberal arts colleges, the students at them have a great deal of anxiety about, and that we try to assuage. And again, we're interested in public scholarship, community engagement, and service. We often talk about this in the program as not allowing student work to go into the Indiana Jones warehouse. In other words, you produce something, it took a lot of work, it was terrifying, and somehow you manage to pull it all together at the end, and then it goes into a file cabinet, never to be seen again. And so we want this work to be out there in public, and we want students to think about it from the beginning as providing some kind of service to one community or another. Looking back at this and finishing up, there are a number of things I think we did right. I'll say some of the things we did wrong perhaps later. But I think the first thing was to ground the program in the existing mission of the institution and our institutional priorities, not to go against the grain of that by asserting the DH-ness of it, but to say, what does this college want to do, and how can these strategies that I've just described serve the interests of the college? That was essential for getting the support of administration and a large number of the faculty, which was just crucial. We made this program student-driven. We attached the funding from the program to the students, and they brought it to the faculty members. Faculty are not going to make time for somebody like me asking them to contribute their services to a program. But in the culture of a liberal arts college, students approaching them saying that they would like to work with them on a certain project, they will almost always say yes, and then we approach them about the additional financial support that would be available for saying yes and for becoming engaged in faculty development initiatives. The third thing is that, again, we allowed the students to teach us what the program should be. We didn't come at it with a clear idea, and we looked to what they wanted to do, and we reshaped it according to that more or less continuously. We celebrated the students and faculty of the program in very public ways. You can find our program if you just search Mellon Scholars on Google. It should be the first thing that comes up. And you can see the ways that we've tried to make the students into stars for the work that they've done for us. You'll also see Alex prominently featured on that site if you go there. And so the final thing is that, or the next to final thing is that we sought collaboration at the local, regional, and national levels quite early in the program. So we tied this into the Digital Liberal Arts Initiative of the GLCA when we could, but also a close relationship with MSU that we continue to develop gladly. And finally, one of the best things that we did that was part of that was to have a DLA fellowship, to bring an advanced graduate student in who is somebody who intends to enter the DH or DLA field professionally, but also has strong disciplinary interests, to lead our seminar, to support faculty development, to provide support for projects, and to foster the variety of relationships that we have. And so that seems like a good place to hand it off to our DLA fellow, Alex Galarza.
So like Bill, I wear a couple different hats as well. I'm actually a graduate student here at Michigan State in the history department. I'm a Latin Americanist. And at Hope, I'm a digital liberal arts fellow. The link was through Matrix, where I was cultural heritage informatics fellow. Now I have some kind of title with Matrix. I don't really know. But I teach the seminar in the Mellon Scholars Program, and I wanted to talk to you about the nitty-gritty of working with students in the digital liberal arts. So while we're a digital liberal arts program, we're grounded in the humanities, which is appropriate considering where the funding's coming from for the program. And we have to have, as a result, a research seminar that grounds these students in the core disciplinary research practices and questions that come from the humanities and that gets them excited about the program in the first place. The digital side of things is always a secondary draw for the students. They are excited about conducting research. They most often already have a mentor identified that's going to make them experts on the French Revolution or whatever they're very excited about pursuing as a topic. So one of the challenges of the seminar is how to keep them interested in what got them excited about research in the first place while throwing the training of becoming a researcher at them with technology. In that, I find it very useful to keep the humanistic focus always at the forefront of the class. Like I agree with Ryan Cordell, I don't think students really care about the digital humanities, it bores them. There are some very excellent, accessible pieces about the digital humanities that are most often written by people who are practicing pedagogy that make it accessible to students. But for the most part, you really need to be grounded in, you know, the corner of DH that's speaking in particular lingo of that post to really care about what's going on in that kind of debate. I work hard at the beginning of the class to shift the students' thinking on questions of audience. And I take a lot of inspiration from Mark Sample here. So we talk about public scholarship as a means to getting them even more excited about the thing that gets them passionate about doing research, and in being able to form a relationship with a mentor that's going to put something out there in the world, right? So if the audience is shifted from the Indiana Jones Warehouse or the grade to a public, imagined either as the classroom, their mentor, or the public, then they think very differently of what kind of work they're doing in the class. How does it run? The class is a year long, so I get sophomores for a year, and I co-teach the seminar with somebody who can grant the fine arts credit and the cultural heritage credit that the seminar falls under, so that this class actually works within students' plan of study. And it's 1/3 feet dipping into tools and methods, getting them out of their comfort zone, teaching them that the most important part about learning technology is to really dive into the deep end, to Google, to ask me for help, to ask each other for help, to develop some kind of troubleshooting method through people and the web and their own confidence to be able to be a little fearless in teaching themselves how to do something. So that's the first third of the seminar, and they build their own personal landing pages, they do some light programming, they run through content management systems and build sites. They also do quite a bit in audiovisual production, and we talk about rhetoric, mediums, and so the digital as a tool to either help you disseminate your research or the digital as a tool to help you conduct your researd. You know, so either on the question side or the sharing side, that we tend to focus our discussions when we make this stuff relevant in class. So the second third of the class is project development and project management. So they do everything in groups, in one group, so that they can't escape each other and learn to like each other. Although they all really do like each other, and it's really actually heartwarming to see like a group of 4 or 5 people become really close throughout a year. And they really become grant writers and project architects. So the co-teachers and I, we work with them on their disciplinary-based questions, how they're going to execute this research, and then they have their research project approved. And then the final third of the class is doing the research. And this is a very tricky part of the class. I've only taught it once, learned a lot. We'll talk about that in a second. But this is where they are not left to their own devices, but the everyday work is less supervised than running through tutorials or required benchmarks for their grants, their grant writing, things like that. So that's how the class is actually structured. The research project is something I want to talk a little bit more about. They have to pick something that would make sense on a site called Digital Holland. So it can be, and I have them actually spitball really zany ideas for how far they can stretch that requirement, because they're not all going to be super excited about looking at something local. But it's scholarship broadly defined. It's not a local history project. It's ethnographic, it's sociological in some ways. They pick what kind of medium they want to tell their project across. And they have to, from different majors, from different interests, come together as a group and say, you study business and dance, I study English and biology. What can we both get excited about for a year, right? And that's also a really exciting process to look in on. We always talk about the completion point is very important. There was somebody in the unconference that was talking about having something to show donors, and even if it's crap, which actually my students' work is fantastic, it's not crap, but even if you have that, that fear that this is not fit for public consumption based on whatever your course goals are, he called it kind of tiered levels of crap. You know, you can have something that at first doesn't look as great, but then it gets better for generation. That's one of the major decisions that we made, is to have Digital Holland always be the sandbox within which the students learn how to do research. So they all have to pick something that goes up on the site as their final project. You can look at these projects at digitalholland.org. It's a WordPress site. They have the two featured ones that you'll see at the front there are a documentary and a web page that includes timeline built on Timeline.js. Telling about a church schism that's very relevant to the community in Holland. I'll talk very briefly. The things that I've probably feel strongest about sharing in terms of success has been, I was very nervous about group work, and it's been the resounding, although they hated it in some ways, they said I wouldn't have given it up for the world. Don't ever change that about this class. You'll hear us complain about it, but don't ever change the group work. We needed that. The close support of skills and development that was necessary to having someone like me in the program is another thing I would insist on. There has to be someone who is available to the students to sit down. You're not always going to have somebody there to hold your hand, but it's invaluable to have that when you really do need it. And they're not going to be able to just bootstrap each other up to those skills. Yeah, learning, we're going to change one major thing next year, which is to focus much more on developing the intellectual muscle and research methods, practices that I took too much as a given of them coming into the program, but they need to have that married to the kind of the digital skills that they're building throughout. Yeah, we'll stop there. We went over, so we can do like 5 minutes. So we're gonna have to talk about failures real quick, and then do general Q&A. Yeah. We can go in order of how we did. Yeah. So we all want to also talk a little bit about failures and challenges. So we'll just go on down the line, maybe keep it to a minute or two, and then we can go. Sure. Yeah. Because there's only a minute worth of failures that you can talk about, really.
First.
Oh, mine first?
Oh, you wanted me to go first? Oh, I thought you meant in the order. Okay.
Oh, in that order. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I think that I'm always looking at things through the rosy tinted glasses, and I walked into a position thinking, we don't have. I left a DH center and came to a centerless place where we wanted to do a lot of digital stuff, and said, oh, we don't have a programmer, but we have we have lots of students, right? And then, so how do we leverage students across these 5 colleges? An idea which I still, I haven't given up yet. And in fact, when I have an opportunity to ask you guys this, I'm really interested in the mechanisms by which we involve students. Like the student-centered is one thing, but the student center is another thing altogether. I know Emily is working on something like that too at Lafayette College. Neither here nor there. The thinking that we would just be able to go into the structures of our institutions and to think that I could just go into the structures of these institutions, right, into which I've just kind of entered in this position to, I want to build digital projects, and find all of the different moving parts to help us build these projects, to piece these kinds of things together, is next to impossible. Not least because everyone who is interested in doing this sort of thing, so I'm thinking of like the person who works on the enterprise email system, right? Who's really also interested in intellectual, these other kinds of intellectual questions, humanities questions, whatever the case may be. They're also interested in lots of other stuff too, and they're busy making the machine run, right? So being able to think that the 5 colleges, I guess, was a menu from which I would be able to find, we've got 5 tons, right? We'll be able to find it all. I think that was kind of overstepping a lot. So recalibrating that. It was more than a minute, my bad.
Thinking about recalibrating, so I think our trajectory is pretty standard, best as I can tell. We had a catalyst on campus. We had people who were willing to put the effort in to get the seed money, to do the startup, to create something that seemed innovative and slightly different, but still built upon what was there, and doing it sort of with an eye toward the future. So I think everybody kind of starts and wants that to be the case. I think the recalibration piece is that even though, so we're, over 5 years into this now as an actual center, actually being in existence, not just thinking, but being in existence, we're now having to renegotiate the positions, the structure, the commitments. And that kind of has taken me by surprise, probably because I wear the same, we share rosy tinted glasses. And because, there's this assumption when you work with people who are highly collaborative, and you're highly collaborative, and there's cool stuff happening, and people are learning, and the energy that, like Alex is describing, and the students who become stars, and all of that is so exciting. You kind of lose track of the fact that our institutions are still businesses, and at a certain level, you're going to have to deal with that. And it can't all be accomplished through grant funding and putting in extra effort. So I think that the gotchas or the issues or the things that I'm grappling with right now fall into those areas. And I feel like even as an established sort of thing, there's still a lot of unknowns. And that surprises me. So I would just offer that for you to consider so that maybe you won't be as surprised. Or maybe you have some feedback or input for me that I can borrow.
Let's see. I'm going to say challenges. How's that? So I guess our first challenge was right about the time that we started doing widespread, having classes all over the campus. We had 40 classes last year, right? Which is huge for a college of 1,600 students. That's a lot of classes. Right at that same time, there was a decision from the administration that our campus would become a BYOD campus, bring your own device. And that was not something that we, running the Digital Scholarship Center, were aware of. Now, in a lot of ways it makes a lot of sense, but I did a survey this past year and discovered that 8% of our students don't have their own laptop with a strong Wi-Fi connection that they can use at all times. So we have an infrastructure sort of question, right? It's just not fair for some students to have to go to a lab that's only open certain hours to do the same homework that others have, infrastructure at home. So that is access is a really significant issue for us. We have a really great, willing excited IT department, but they are, I think, like every IT department I've ever heard of, overstretched, right? They're already doing a lot of stuff. So I'm hearing running on affective labor a lot, sort of already, and that would be definitely, you know, I do this as an overload. We do have a grant, but I forgot to write into the grant like extra stuff for myself. So I teach a full load and I kind of run this project. Luckily we have Ancom Wen, who's at this conference, but flying off, I think, right now, so she's not here at this session. You can tweet at her at Anita Conchita. She, the best handle ever. She joined us last year, and she is fabulous and really, really leading the effort on our campus and getting the students involved. And I'm going into that thing where challenges are so much more fun to talk about than successes that I'm going too long. But I'll just say one other thing, which is that, oh, I had another challenge that was really important, and now I've forgotten it. So it must have been solved already. All right, I'll finish.
So challenges, problems, regrets, remorse, things that I would have done differently. I look back and it's a wonderful life quality to all of them, because we had to learn things as we proceeded, and if I could go back in time with the knowledge I have now, we might do something differently, but I don't think we could have done it at the time. I think at the consortial level, we would have provided more support and infrastructure before we began a lot of these projects. But on the other hand, we needed to know what kind of project we would get before we could implement that. And now that's in development. I think in the context of the Mellon program at Hope, the largest challenges that we've had, I think, have been political, a lack of, I think, from the beginning, of consultation of people throughout the college, because we conceived of it as digital humanities, and so we talked to people who you'd think of as the usual suspects in DH, when it actually became a program that encompassed the whole of the college, and or is on its way to doing that. And so that has caused, that lack of consultation in the planning phase way back when has resulted in a lot of saying we're sorry after the fact over the years. But what could we have done otherwise? I don't know.
Yeah, I alluded to it briefly, but I needed to have grounded their research methods more, to give them a little bit more intellectual muscle and planning to be able to execute the projects. And they felt very nervous during, I think a healthy amount of fear and struggle is healthy, but we might have stretched that a little bit beyond what it should have been. And they all have to come together to pick a project. It all worked. Not everyone felt that it was their passion project, but they understood that, okay, I'll do this for a year and then I'll get to do what I want to do. And this is, kind of an abstract thing that I'm going to wrap up and then take with me. One student did feel a little cheated that they didn't get to do something that they wanted to. And if I have one student that feels that way, I want to next year make sure that I do a better job of having that group process of coming to the topic that they focus on be a little bit more consensual. But what do you all think?
Yeah, I guess talking about the idea of switching to digital liberal arts. I mean, at a liberal arts college, we have a lot of buy-in from a lot of departments, except the exclusively humanities department. And I feel like sometimes when you don't specifically include humanities, they fall away. Feel excluded from that conversation again. So I'm wondering, how do you maintain that balance between being inclusive and then not suddenly also still relying on the statistics people, the computer science, the engineers who are louder and more vociferous on our campus, and the humanities who tend to be a little bit more contained and isolated?
Maybe we inadvertently did the right thing by starting with DH and then broadening it out. But if you start with it representing the whole institution, maybe there is that risk of humanities faculty members who don't feel that they're included in an initiative of that kind resisting it. But I think there are always converts to be one at a time, and to be intentional about hiring, to serve on hiring committees, and to look for candidates who could be helpful in bringing these initiatives about.
Miriam Posner, it's all about relationships with people. You have to hire for that. You have to make sure there's time carved out for the people you hire to do that. And people are complicated.
I think my rhetoric does one thing and my actions do another. Like, I sell it, it's all digital scholarship, right? But when I'm because it's my wheelhouse, you know, I can talk about, you know, text and text mining and you know, Renaissance literature, like these sorts of, so when I find myself in conversations, when I find myself, you know, these are the kinds of things. So projects that kind of seep up in these accidental ways are often humanities-based projects, but so I guess it's kind of like, just depends on who's who's doing the selling, who's doing the talking a lot of times.
Yeah, I suppose I'm lucky. I'm a professor in the English department, so so the English department has been on board. But it is also, just as a strategy, one thing we've noticed is once you get a faculty member from an individual department, they sort of get the other people in their department. I see other people nodding. They get other people in their department on board, right? So I don't think we actually tried to do this intentionally. I don't think we're that wise or strategic or Machiavellian or something, but it just happens that, you know, we got one biologist and the rest of them came along. You know, we got one, our history department has just done really exciting things, as, you know, DH history is really exciting. So, yeah, so that's worked for us.
Maybe if I could add one more thing to that, is that maybe in the humanities, there's a disproportionate anxiety about what counts. And there's a perception that that projects of this sort, especially as they become multidisciplinary, don't count for tenure promotion in the same way. And so that's a conversation to have with the deciders. You know, the deans, I think, I've found have been supportive, and the administration in general. But it seems like it's more of a problem with colleagues. That there's a perception that getting involved with this will cost you the support of your colleagues. And I don't know any special way of addressing that except the long wait.
I think the additional thing I would add to what Bill said, we've certainly encountered that, and we've encountered tenure track faculty. Most of our faculty research projects are led by tenured faculty. The tenure track, and it's interdisciplinary. We go over into archaeology, anthropology, you know, it covers the social sciences as well as humanities, but the deeper, you know, like classics, not so much so. What we found is getting the students. If a student wants to do a research project and it includes a digital element, you know, that's one way to give a tenure track faculty member an advantage that counts at our institutions for them. And it also helps the student achieve their goals. But those are some tough areas to bridge the evaluation of this scholarship, especially at our institutions.
Andrea, I really liked your comment about the fact that students also need a chance, an opportunity to develop digital literacy and actually need training, because we so often assume this younger generation somehow born with the digital skills. Yeah. And so, but I'm wondering, so for us colleagues, you know, there's funding, there are workshops and so forth. So who actually teaches the students in your digital scholarship center? Who actually, you know, you mentioned you had a course, right? For the basics, I guess. And you know, at Denison, we have something in the arts, digital media, but it really isn't digital scholarship at all. It's mainly Photoshop and those kind of things. So who teaches and what do they teach in your center?
The great question. That's the one I should have mentioned under things we need to work out. So we started with the idea was it was going to be diffuse across the curriculum, right? That we would teach faculty who would then teach this way in their classes. We started with the idea of transforming the pedagogy rather than the content, right? So that the way that people teach would be more engaging, more sort of project-based, more undergraduate, all these things that everybody in here is already doing, right? And that's been really exciting, but what we missed is that students need those sort of really fundamental literacies, right? And especially students who don't have the same access. You know, we have lots of different, you know, sort of socioeconomic issues and all of that. So what we have is in our center, we have two full-time people who are fabulous. Ann Kang-Wen, who I just mentioned, and Sonia Chaidez. And they are available on a consultation basis up to now. That's what they've been doing. and so that students, when they get an assignment in a class, can go there as a kind of consultation. What we're going to start next year is a 1-unit lab class, so that students can take the class in order to learn this. Our long-term idea is that faculty can connect the class to almost anything they're doing, and the class can become a lab. That is a in-planning thing right now, right? And it'll just be a couple of us that are connecting it. We also have, I'm going to keep this brief because I'm sure you guys have all these other solutions. We also have a campus-wide requirement for a class called Science and Math in Context, or SMC. So these classes already are kind of doing contextualized scholarship, and it's usually lower divisions, so it's a good place for those sort of basic skills. And so a colleague in math and I are teaching a class called Just Hacking. It'll be a social justice, and yes, I'm thinking back to this morning's panel, right, where I learned a lot. It'll be a social justice and network skills and some basic Python for an app creation kind of thing. So there's a wide variety, and the other thing I should say is it's not, different students need totally different skills, right? Some students can walk in and they'll teach WordPress to everybody else in the room. Other students, you know, you say computer and they start to freeze up, right? So we don't have one class that teaches everything, and we're still trying to sort it out. So maybe you guys that are farther along can tell us what we should be doing. That was a terrible segue. Sorry.
Well, I'll just say I'm interested in this very same question, right? Like how do these mechanisms come into place? Because as we've been working on projects, it's been a find a student who we want to pay to learn this and be a research assistant, but kind of like an apprenticeship for whatever skill set this project needs. Partner with, in our case, a librarian, myself, you know, educational technology, kind of building this team that they're all kind of like working together on. You know, whatever the question itself is. That seems like a very piecemeal and ad hoc way of doing this. There's a system in place to create that ad hocness, right? But I would be much more comfortable with, you know, a system like Mellon Scholars, or a system that runs through our educational technology systems that already have kind of training implementations in place. How can we tap into those mechanisms?
I think we have a unique model, and that is that we have a cohort-forming sophomore seminar that has a competitive application process among the first years. And after that, it's 2 semesters, as Alex was describing, and kind of formation of that cohort, methodological training, team-based. And then after that, they can continue to be team-based, but they'll often be individual, too. And they do something called the Mellonizing courses. And they'll go out and find a course that they can ramp up in terms of the amount of work that they're doing, which could include more scholarly engagement, digital project building. A variety of options are available to them. But they're essentially, after the seminar, free agents to pick and choose throughout the institution what they want, whom they want to work with and what they want to produce. But we try to provide more and more options for them as these collaborative projects get more underway.
So Hamilton has an open curriculum and very few requirements. And whenever we start talking about requirements, so I would love to have a model like the course unit. Whenever we start doing that, there's a lot of pushback. So the way we have sort of been handling the digital literacies, there's strong emphasis on effective communication in all forms. Writing and speaking are, you know, what our students are known for. So we've leveraged that in course assignments, again, in large part through the Hill Group efforts, to help students and faculty think about how to communicate most appropriately what it is they're trying to say. Certain forms of content are better expressed this way. So how do we accomplish that? So it becomes a very pairwise thing, which is not very efficient, but in many ways results in deep learning. So it doesn't accomplish the, yes, all of our students coming out of Hamilton have these literacies. And we've built upon that a little bit more with this class model. Class developed, we developed it as a result of our cinema and new media studies curriculum, because a lot of the students taking those courses were doing independent projects that went on for semester after semester after semester. So we decided, why don't we formalize this and just create a program that is this research effort. We pay the students over the summer, we pay them over the academic year to work on research and to learn the skills that will help them in the areas they're interested in. Now, we don't tell them what research to work on. They pair up with faculty and sometimes, you know, quadruple up with the really popular faculty. So we have that issue. We've got 4 people who want to work with this one professor. You know, we run into that. But I don't consider those issues. Those are great. What we have to do then is figure out how to provide that same level of high interaction to accomplish their goals that they get in the courses when it's that more confined time frame. So again, not hitting broad bases, but hoping through the process of these very specific interest-driven interactions that they are developing the digital literacies necessary to make them effective in the areas they wish to operate. I wish we could do a combination. You know, I listened to that Mellon course that you teach, Alex, and I'm so I'm like, we have a couple of courses. We have Intro to DH, we have Media and Production, you know, we have Intro to New Media Studies, but we don't really have that methods that extends across a year. That's fabulous. Because it gives them the time, you know, that's just it. They need the time to actually work into this stuff. As you said, they don't come with it all. How could we expect them to?
I work them into my courses, but it takes a lot of time away from the other content, you know, plus the global element. So there's a point where, wait a second, I only have so many hours in the semester to where I really need 2 semesters to teach the same course now, if I want to have the same content.
Yeah, I think that's why we really focus on pedagogy rather than content, because it's that exact same. I'm sure everybody who's done this, when you try to teach even the smallest, you know, I'm going to have my students blog instead of write essays, and then you discover, oh my gosh, I've got to teach all this other stuff, right? So the focus then is on how to engage with it, and I also love this idea of the students sort of. If they have one professor who uses a sort of project-based learning design in their class, they go the next semester and they talk to somebody else and it's like, oh, so-and-so did this. I mean, have you all had this experience? And then you're like, oh, cool professors are doing that. I'm going to be like them, you know? So we work on a, I don't know, contagion model or something. What contagion you want to catch?
Zombie digital scholarship.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think to that point, it's something I really struggle with. We're just now getting a 4th hour for our freshman composition, our first semester of it. And so there's a lot of discussion in my department about what we do in freshman composition. And I definitely take a project's approach to it and think about getting students thinking, right? If you don't have anything to say, then good writing doesn't matter as much, right? But so I just think it's really interesting what you're saying, to think about how much more can you add into the class, and what happens when you actually are taking things out of the class, but at what cost? So I don't have an answer to that, and I don't expect you to have an answer to that, but I do think it's interesting for us to make choices in our courses, in the teaching that we do, of what we value and what content maybe leaves the course for the sake of other skills or other opportunities or experiences.
I feel that same tension. I'm a Jane Austen scholar, and you know, she wrote. I used to start my syllabus by saying, you know, unfortunately she only wrote 6 books, but that's lovely because that's exactly how many we can read in a semester. But now that I do all this other stuff, I don't teach all of her books, right?
Yeah.
What am I doing, right? So I feel that tension, but I think the students are learning more. I really believe that. Right? They're learning more even if they're reading less. And of course, I always believe, I have rose-colored glasses, that they then go off and read the rest of the books. You know?
How about other questions?
So this is a question that you've all answered in interesting drafts, but I'm maybe framing it more broadly. What advice would you give to someone who's coming from a large public university system that's going to be starting at a small liberal arts school and building a digital studies program in the English department or a humanities program?
So
There's so many things that depend on other things, and without knowing the context, it's hard. It's hard to answer.
That's the problem when you start somewhere you
Yeah.
don't know the
that,
context.
right. So my narrative for that is that I made that transition, and I spent, fortunately, and this can get into another conversation about the contingency of these kinds of positions sometimes. So fortunately, I was on a 3-year. I am currently on a 3-year grant because I spent the first 6 months, the first 4 months maybe, learning the cultures of 5 different liberal arts colleges, where culture is
That's why I call Jacob's position the most insane
incredibly
position that's ever been created.
Even this semester, I've been on the job for a year and a half now. I'm just now kind of really getting a sense of who Denison is, right? Like who. So there will be a moment, right, where a prolonged period of time where it's just about. As someone who hates feeling this way, it just feels like you're just like treading water, and you're just like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. There's a lot of that, but stuff sticks, and then it turns into a center, or whatever version of what it's supposed to be. It turns into.
It's inevitable that you get that feeling, but I'm glad that we've touched on the labor question and don't. Bill's very supportive. And
yeah, everyone's very supportive of me too.
But I'll say this: like, be very realistic about the time that you're there, what you're being paid to do, what's feasible, and then set the bar a little bit lower and be realistic about being able to accomplish that. And then from there, have that be the kernel that allows you to be flexible and to look at opportunities of, oh, this person really does want to work with me, and this person really is reading what I send them and learning. Like, wow, they came back to me and they have their own site now. Because faculty, just like students, they have all kinds of other commitments. I mean, I feel like students and faculty are very similar in this way. Yeah. And I'm always talking to my students, I'm like, it's great that you have all these extracurriculars, but this is what you should be doing to benefit. So be realistic about that. Saying no is so important. Be strategic about what you were hired to do is going to be effective working with who and with what time, because Thomas, Padilla and I, and Jacob and I have talked about this. The biggest danger that exists is constantly opening new loops, new relationship, new person. What do they do? What are they interested in? What are their course goals? What are their students like? Are they my students? Are they my program? Are they another program? Is that effective for my students, and do I have to answer to? Every sit down with coffee is fantastic because it's sitting down and getting to know someone. And you have to do that work. But unless you have a worked out plan and sketch it on paper that says, when they ask me this, I'm going to say no because it is in their best interest for me to say no. And I often do that with my dissertation. I say I need to write a dissertation, and if I don't finish it, it's not going to happen the way you want it to happen. So learn to say no and be realistic, I would say.
Retrospecting on this a little bit, I think the most important line in our budget is food.
Yeah.
And it means hosting events, taking people to trying to get them to know you. And I think as a new faculty member, you're more likely than a senior faculty member to get encouragement and support for what you're doing. And so I think the odds are on your side that way, but it's a diplomatic project. And I think in this case, Alex has been kind of masterful at Hope College in reaching out to a community that I've already exhausted with my requests.
Quick one or quick one? Yep.
Okay, well, so since we're talking about issues of labor, and I mean a lot of threads actually are resonating with me. I wanted to make a plug, since there's so many teachers in the room, about getting students plugged into the broader communities of scholars. So I work at HNet, which, if you are not aware of, it's an online series of scholarly networks. And students can go on there and ask questions and talk to researchers and scholars in various fields. And so, you know, as content gets kind of pushed a little bit in the course, you know, you can send students outward and have them talk to other people.
That's great. All right, well, we'll not interfere with the next time slot. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.